all-time individual Sun Devils with head coach Bobby Hurley.
Arizona State getting a little taste of their own medicine heading into halftime tonight, leading, and then Oregon coming back to close out the game, taking ASU 75-70. Welcome to the postgame analysis at Devil's Digest. My name is Nick Borgia. That's Hode Urbino, our publisher. And Hode, a really close game that did come down to the wire, that final 7 seconds. Oregon ultimately getting done 75-70. What's the reaction?
Yeah, I think really the first 8 minutes of the second half, and like you said, usually it's ASU that is the one that comes out of the locker room applying a blitz in basketball terms, if you will, and really imposing their will and really tilting the scales in their favor. But tonight it was actually Oregon that really did that. They really had all kinds of defensive looks given to ASU, and ASU for the most part was not able to solve them for long stretches in the second half. I mean, we saw a lot of trapping defense in the backcourt, mixing man and zone, and again, it didn't matter whatever Oregon was throwing at Arizona State. The Sun Devils really had a hard time with it. I don't want to belabor the point too much on the officials, and we're going to talk about all the things that actually did go wrong for Arizona State. But when you look at the stat sheet, first of all, I have to give credit to one of my subscribers who saw the stat sheet in the first half and saw that ASU only got called for 14 fouls, and he goes, okay, I guess it means ASU is going to be called for a plethora of fouls in the second half. I think that guy should play the Powerball and the Lotto this week, because it was absolutely right, Nick. The foul disparity was absolutely ridiculous. And again, I'm not saying ASU played a perfect game. Maybe they even deserved to win. But ASU was called for 20 fouls in the second half. Again, after only being called for 4 in the first half, Oregon was called for 8. If you look at the free throw disparity for the entire game, Oregon went to the line 26 times. ASU only went 10 times. So it really that was definitely an issue. Bobby Hurley, after the game ended, chose his words very carefully, not wanting again a fine by the Pac-12. But he said it was a circus out there, and I think absolutely that was the case. Again, ASU did plenty wrong to lose this game. Don't get me wrong, but when you look at the scoreboard and it's just a 2-possession margin in the final score, and you see the disparity with the fouls, I think there are some legitimate reasons to come absolutely with a lot of criticism towards the refs tonight.
Well, besides that interesting free throw attempt disparity, the offensive performance was a little interesting tonight. I mean, Desmond Cabert Jr., who's usually a top scorer for ASU, really was dormant in that first half, only ended with the 6 points. But then DJ Horn seems like he's out of his slump and led the team with 17 points tonight. But all around, it just wasn't enough, and there was just so many offensive turnovers that we noticed, especially at the start of that second half. It just wasn't going to help ASU at all down the line. Yeah,
I think that maybe the trapping defense in the backcourt didn't actually cause the turnovers, but really took the offense out of rhythm and just caused a turnover 15, 20 seconds later. And that was really a big story for Arizona State. Obviously, the length of Oregon really bothered ASU. Even though they're still able to get 26 points in the paint, they settled for a lot of shots outside. Like I said, Days Cambridge really struggled for the first time this year. Actually, it was scoreless in the first half and only scored 6 points in the second half. Granted, both of them with 3-pointers were part of the comeback by Arizona State that did cut the deficit to 2. But maybe ultimately really was a little too little too late. Frankie Collins also was scoreless in the first half, scored 13 in the second half. Really had a solid period. But again, those are 2 players that you really need to be playing really consistent for both halves. I will give credit for Luther Muhammad, I think, who did maybe pick up some of the slack from Days Cambridge. Scored 12 points off the bench, played really good defense. But really, in the end, just Arizona State not being able to solve the defense of Oregon, really not challenge them inside enough. That was really the story. But we talked to DJ Horn after the game, and he didn't take any solace at all for finally having one of his best games this year, scoring 18 points. And we documented the struggles of DJ Horn, barely scoring in the last 3 or 4 games, was suspended due to conduct detrimental to the team in that Washington State game. So it was good to see him up and going. but I'm not saying that came at the expense of a Days Cambridge or Frankie Collins being really doormat at offense. But those are three players that Arizona State, when they're playing one of the better teams in the league in Oregon, I know maybe the record won't show it, but it is a pretty talented team that ASU lost tonight, and it's nice to have DJ Horn finally scoring and playing like we're expected to. But when Days Cambridge and Frankie Collins are struggling, for example, and obviously you just have foul trouble galore, really hurt Devin Cambridge and Warren Washington in the second half. That was just really too much to come for Arizona State.
And you touched on that full court press that we saw on the defensive side, and it was so interesting to see how early that was deployed because of how far ASU was down trying to close that deficit. But again, it just was not enough to come back and take that win ultimately.
Yeah, and look, you can talk about Arizona State's defense maybe getting a very unfair treatment by the refs, and there is some validity to that. But let's also be fair that Oregon was very efficient beyond the arc in the second half, made 5 of 8 shots, and for the entire second half, shot over 59%. So again, I mean, you could talk about the refs, maybe having a hand in the game, and again, when it is a close score like that, there is some validity to that criticism. But ultimately, when Arizona State is going to look at the film of this game, they're going to see just doing a really, really bad in the rotation on the three-point shooting, and just really in general on the shooters, and the inside game, with the caveat of Warren Washington and Devin Cambridge being in foul trouble for most of the second half. But Dante, the center for Oregon, scored 18 points. Oregon had 32 points in the paint. That was just one more obstacle that Arizona State absolutely could not overcome. But when we also look at the free throw disparity, Oregon scored 48 points in the second half, and that's a horrible number from a defensive standpoint. But 17 of those points did come from the free throw line. I'm not saying that's a comforting thought for any defense that does suffer such a performance, but that does also put somewhat things in perspective. And we know that Arizona State is a team that their offense is really fueled by their defense. We talked about this really being part of the DNA of this squad from day one in this season. And when that doesn't happen for them, they usually do come on the losing end. Tonight was just another painful example of that.
Alrighty, Hode. So it's been a little while since we've been up here together. Obviously, last weekend, Sun Devils go on the road. They get swept. This weekend, they split their home series against the Oregon schools. So just with those 3 previous losses, just really not contributing a whole lot of positivity to that tournament resume. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ASU maybe at best right now would be the next 4 out. So that's I guess what teams 73 to 77 or whatever the math does really does come out. And look, I mean, they lost 5 of their last 6 games, and sure, I mean, it's worse if this would be happening in late February or early March, but that definitely, like you said, is not going to help the resume at all. And let's face it, I mean, some of the teams that they lost in this stretch, I mean, namely both Washington schools and both Oregon schools, are probably not even going to sniff March Madness in the field at 68. So now it's not a matter of just having just one loss after a loss stacking up, but you're not even having the quote-unquote quality loss or the quote-unquote understandable losses that maybe the committee would look at favorably. And you and I talked, I think at least on one occasion, maybe more than that the end of the regular season is absolutely brutal for Arizona State. Away game in Tucson, away games at the LA schools. I'm not saying that you just sit here right now and just mark an L on each of those contests. But obviously those games that ASU is going to be an underdog, maybe even a heavy underdog. So you have to make some gains up until that really brutal stretch to end the regular season. And right now ASU simply is not able to be successful. I mean, if they got a split at the Washington schools, if they swept the Oregon schools, which I don't think was really feats that were just impossible to achieve, I think that you would just look at their tournament resume in a whole different light. But there's no doubt about it. Their tournament resume took a huge hit tonight, and just the hill that they need to climb to even be considered on the bubble is just becoming steeper and steeper and steeper. And right now, you just need a long run, maybe even a Pac-12 tournament championship to secure your spot in the field at 68. And we know that ASU and their history in the Pac-12 tournament is definitely not a great one. So I would say that the chances right now are looking pretty bleak. Let's see what they can do in the Bay Area next weekend. I'm very careful to say winnable games because I think this team has really proved turning the winnable games to just get games in the loss column. But maybe they can gain some ground next week. But if they're going to get swept like they were the Washington schools, then I think it pretty much can just close the book on their chances. But nonetheless, you just want ASU just to really fix itself and really go back to that defensive DNA that they had for a good stretch of the season, and that absolutely has been absent for the last 6 games.
All right, so for that ASU road trip to California next week, and make sure you keep it locked in at DevilsDigest.com for all the top coverage. Also drop a follow at Devils Digest on Twitter. For Hoder Bino and the rest of our Devils Digest staff, my name's Nick Borgia. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next time.